Bessus, son of Artabazus, you know why you stand here?
No.
Then meet your judgment.
Keep moving!
On your feet, dog.
Hashodel here!
Let him see the faces that justice wears.
Darius has lost the favor of Ahura Mazda.
You dare say it?
I only whisper what the gods have already shouted.
In the scorched valleys of ancient Bactria, the wind carried the scent of dust, sweat, and blood. A single man stumbled through the streets, barefoot, bound, and broken. His name was Bessus, once a satrap of the Persian Empire, now a hunted traitor dragged to his final reckoning. The soldiers who marched him forward said nothing. The people lining the road whispered curses. Somewhere in the distance, the drums of Maston thundered, a grim symphony for a dying king. He could still taste iron on his tongue. His lips were cracked from thirst, but behind the ruin of his face, his eyes still burned with a stubborn, impossible pride. He had ruled Bactria, commanded armies, and once dined beside King Darius III himself. Yet now, his wrists were tied with rope soaked in his own blood. The crowd spat as he passed, calling him the dog who murdered his master. He ignored them. He had not come this far to beg. Months earlier, Bessus had stood beneath the burning Persian sun, his armor gleaming, his banners snapping in the wind. He had been a man of immense power, the satrap of Bactria, the empire's eastern jewel. His men feared him. His word carried the weight of kings. But power in Persia's final days had turned to poison. Alexander's armies were coming, young, unstoppable, and ruthless. When Darius fled east after the defeat at Gaugamela, Bessus rode beside him, watching the last king of kings crumble into despair. Darius's once commanding voice had turned to pleading. His once brilliant eyes had dimmed with fear. To Bessus, it was intolerable. A true ruler did not run. A true king did not beg for mercy. One night, as the royal caravan crept through the deserts near Ecbatana, Bessus made his choice. Around a fire, with his fellow nobles watching the stars, he whispered treason. Darius has lost the favor of Ahura Mazda, he said quietly. He has led us to ruin. If we do not act, Alexander will devour us all. His words hung in the air like smoke. One by one, his companions nodded. The decision was made. Days later, the golden chains were brought out, chains once reserved for royal ceremonies. They bound the hands of the great king himself. Darius, sick and exhausted, looked at Bessus with disbelief. "Bessus, you," he gasped. Bessus met his gaze without flinching. "You are no longer king," he said coldly. "Persia needs strength, not a ghost." The royal cart rolled east under guard, its curtains drawn, its prisoner silent. But Alexander's fury was not far behind. When word reached him that Darius had been taken by his own men, something inside him ignited. He gathered a small detachment of his fastest riders and rode without rest. Through scorching plains, across rivers swollen with spring floods, through deserts that swallowed armies whole. He would not allow the Persian king to die by any hand but his own. But he was too late. Near the plains of Hyrcania, the traitors panicked. Alexander was coming faster than they had imagined. The trap they had set was collapsing around them. And in that frenzy of fear, they committed the act that would damn them forever. Darius was dragged from his cart. He tried to speak, but before he could, A spear pierced his side. Another struck his back. He fell to his knees, gasping for air as blood soaked the sand beneath him. Bessus stood over him, his face unreadable. "It had to be done," he whispered. "Forgive me, or don't." They left his body in the dirt. The King of Kings, abandoned like a dog on the side of the road. When Alexander's cavalry arrived, the air was still thick with the stench of blood. A lone Macedonian soldier found the body, face pale, lips blue, life barely clinging. He called for his king. Alexander dismounted and knelt beside the dying man. Darius's eyes flickered open. There are a dozen versions of what he said in that final moment, but all agree on one thing: Alexander wept. He took off his own cloak and covered Darius's body. "Tell them," he murmured to his men, "that a great king has fallen, and his murderer will find no peace on this earth." From that moment, Bessus's fate was sealed. He was no longer a satrap, nor even a traitor. He was a marked man, hunted by the wrath of a conqueror who now carried both vengeance and divine authority. The chase across Central Asia became legend. Bessus fled through the deserts of Sogdia, across mountains that touched the sky. His army withered with every mile. His allies deserted him, whispering that the Macedonian was not a man but a god. When they reached the Oxus River, he burned the boats behind him, thinking it would slow his pursuers. But Alexander's soldiers, relentless and clever, tore down their tents, stuffed them with reeds and straw, and floated across the raging water in less than 5 days. When the news reached Bessus, his last strength broke. He sat alone in his tent that night, staring into the dying embers of the fire. "Perhaps," he muttered, "I should have stayed with the king and died beside him." His officers overheard the words and knew he had lost his fire. At dawn, his own men seized him. They dragged him in chains before Alexander's general, Ptolemy, and offered him up like an offering to the gods of vengeance. When Alexander saw Bessus at last, he did not rage, he did not shout. He looked at him with the calm, piercing eyes of a man who already owned the world. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why betray your king? Your blood, your oath." Bessus's voice trembled for the first time. "He was weak," he said. "The empire was dying. I did what I thought was right." Alexander's expression did not change. "You did what was easy," he replied, "and for that, you will learn what it means to be ruled." The punishment was not swift. Alexander had no interest in mercy or chaos. He wanted a lesson carved into memory. Before a vast assembly of soldiers and Persian nobles, Bessus was stripped naked. Iron restraints locked around his neck and wrists, forcing him to bow his head. Alexander ordered that his nose and ears be cut away. A Persian punishment for a Persian traitor. Blood poured down his chest as he fell to the ground, choking on pain. "You will not die yet," Alexander said coldly. "You will face Persian justice." The mutilated satrap was taken to Ecbatana, where the final act was to be played. Some say he was tied between 2 bent trees, his limbs stretched until the wood itself screamed. When the ropes were cut, the trees snapped upright, tearing his body apart in an explosion of blood and sinew. Others say Alexander handed him to Darius's family, who sliced his flesh piece by piece, weeping as they did so. Whatever the truth, the end was slow. And when it came, there was no mercy left in heaven or earth. When the screams finally stopped, Alexander turned away. His soldiers cheered, but he remained silent. In his heart, he felt no triumph, only the cold satisfaction of order restored. He had avenged a king he once sought to destroy, and in doing so, became that king's successor. The legend would later twist the tale, saying Bessus was impaled alive, hoisted high upon a wooden stake until his body sagged under its own weight. It made the story darker, bloodier, easier to tell. But the truth was crueler still. The real punishment was not the pain. It was the purpose behind it. Every act was deliberate, political, symbolic. Alexander had not simply executed a traitor. He had crowned himself the heir of Persia. And so, as the sun set over the mountains of Bactria, the wind carried the echoes of that day. A king's vengeance, a traitor's screams, and the birth of an empire built on both. In the centuries that followed, storytellers would argue over what really happened to Bessus. But one truth would always remain in the shadow of Alexander. Even the proudest men learned that loyalty was not a virtue. It was survival. And in that dust-choked land where empires rose and fell, a single wooden stake, whether real or imagined, stood as the symbol of how absolute power demands absolute obedience, and how betrayal always ends the same way.